Today is March 21st. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It's a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today we're going to be reading out of the Big Book, pages 232 through 235. And out of the 12 and 12, we're going to be reading page 90 today. So with all that, my friends, let's get right to the good stuff. Today out of the Big Book, we are going to be in the sixth story of the Pioneers of AA. This is Jim's story on page 232. This physician, one of the earliest members of AA's first black group, tells of how freedom came as he worked among his people. So with all that, we'll get right to it on page 232. I was born in a little town in Virginia, in an average religious home. My father, a Negro, was a country physician. I remember my early youth, my mother dressed me just as she did my two sisters, and I wore curls until I was at least 6 years of age. At that time, I started school, and that's how I got rid of the curls. I found that even then, I had fears and inhibitions. We lived just a few doors from the First Baptist Church, and when they had funerals, I remember very often asking my mother whether the person was good or bad, and whether they were going to heaven or hell. I was about 6 then. My mother had been recently converted and, actually, had become a religious fanatic. That was her main neurotic manifestation. She was very possessive with us children. Mother drilled into me a very puritanical point of view as to sex relations, as well as to motherhood and womanhood. I'm sure my ideas as to what life should be like were quite different from that of the average person with whom I associated. Later on in life, that took its toll. I realize that now. About this time, an incident took place in grade school that I have never forgotten because it made me realize that I was actually a physical coward. During recess, we were playing basketball, and I had accidentally tripped a fellow just a little larger than I was. He took the basketball and smashed me in the face with it. That was enough provocation to fight, but I didn't fight. And I realized after recess why I didn't. It was fear. That hurt and disturbed me a great deal. Mother was of the old school and figured that anyone I associated with should be of the proper type. Of course, in my day, times had changed. She just hadn't changed with the times. I don't know whether it was right or wrong, but at least I know that people weren't thinking the same. We weren't even permitted to play cards in our home. But Father would give us just a little toddy with whiskey and sugar and warm water now and then. We had no whiskey in the house other than my father's private stock. I never saw him drunk in my life, although he'd take a shot in the morning and usually one in the evening, and so did I. But for the most part, he kept his whiskey in his office. The only time I ever saw my mother take anything alcoholic was around Christmas time, when she would drink some eggnog or light wine. In my first year in high school, Mother suggested that I not join the cadet unit. She got a medical certificate so that I should not have to join it. I don't know whether she thought she was a pacifist or whether she thought that in the event of another war, it would have some bearing on my joining up. About then, I realized that my point of view on the opposite sex wasn't entirely like that of most of the boys I knew. And for that reason, I believe, I married at a much younger age than I would have had it not been for my home training. My wife and I had been married for some 30 years now. Vi was the first girl that I ever took out. I had quite a heartache about her then, because she wasn't the type of girl that my mother wanted me to marry. In the first place, she had been married before. I was her second husband. My mother resented it so much that first Christmas after our marriage, she didn't even invite us to dinner. After our first child came, my parents both became allies. Then, in later days, after I became an alcoholic, they both turned against me. My father had come out of the South and had suffered a great deal down there. He wanted to give me the very best, and he thought that nothing but a doctor would suffice. On the other hand, I believe that I've always been medically inclined, though I had never been able to see medicine quite as the average person sees it. I do surgery because that's something that you can see. It's more tangible. But I can remember in the postgraduate days and during internship that very often I'd go to a patient's bed and start the process of elimination, and then, very often, I'd wind up guessing. That wasn't the way it was with my father. I think with him, it possibly was a gift. Intuitive diagnosis. Father, through the years, had built up a very good mail-order business because, at the time, there wasn't too much money in medicine. I don't think I suffered too much as far as the racial situation was concerned because I was born into it and knew nothing other than that. A man wasn't actually mistreated, though if he was, he could only resent it. He could do nothing about it. On the other hand, I got quite a different picture farther south. Economic conditions had a great deal to do with it, because I've often heard my father say that his mother would take one of the old-time flour sacks and cut a hole through the bottom and 2 corners of it, and there you'd have a gown. Of course, when my father finally came to Virginia to work his way through school, he resented the Southern cracker, as he often called them, so much that he didn't even go back to his mother's funeral. He said that he never wanted to set foot in the Deep South again, and he didn't. I went to elementary and high school in Washington, D.C., and then to Howard University. My internship was in Washington. I never had too much trouble in school. I was able to get my work out. All my troubles arose when I was thrown socially among groups of people. As far as school was concerned, I made fair grades throughout. All right, my friends, we will stop there on page 235. We'll come back to this in just a minute. All right, my friends, so we are in step 10 of the 12 and 12 today, which is continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And if you'll recall in yesterday's reading, we were talking about the inventory here, and it says here, once this healthy practice has become grooved, it will be so interesting and profitable that the time it takes won't be missed. For these minutes and sometimes hours spent in self-examination are bound to make all the other hours of our day better and happier. So in other words, it's certainly worth the time that we put in. And that's how sobriety for me has been as a whole. So we're going to go ahead and finish off page 90 today. Before we ask what a spot check inventory is, let's look at the kind of setting in which such an inventory can do its work. It is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. If somebody hurts us and we are sore, we are in the wrong also. But are there no exceptions to this rule? What about justifiable anger? If somebody cheats us, aren't we entitled to be mad? Can't we be properly angry with self-righteous folk? For us of AA, these are dangerous exceptions. We found that justified anger ought to be left to those better qualified to handle it. Few people have been more victimized by resentments than we alcoholics. It mattered little whether our resentments were justified or not. A burst of temper could spoil a day, and a well-nursed grudge can make us miserably ineffective. Nor were we ever skillful in separating justified from unjustified anger. As we saw it, our wrath was always justified. Anger, that occasional luxury of more balanced people, could keep us on an emotional jag indefinitely. These emotional dry benders often led straight to the bottle. Other kinds of disturbances, jealousy, envy, self-pity, or hurt pride, did the same thing. A spot check inventory taken in the midst of such disturbances can be a very great help in quieting stormy emotions. Today's spot check finds its chief application to situations which arise in each day's march. The consideration of long-standing difficulties had better be postponed, when possible, to times deliberately set aside for that purpose. The quick inventory is aimed at our daily ups and downs, especially those where people or new events throw us off balance and tempt us to make mistakes. All right, so real quick on this while it's fresh, a spot check inventory taken in the midst of such disturbances can be a very great help in quieting those stormy emotions. Life gets chaotic throughout the day, and for me, doing that spot check right away can help out. Where did I mess up? Okay, what can I learn from this? Do I owe somebody an amends? And I really like this part here. It is a spiritual axiom that in every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. You know, we've all got our issues. And if I'm letting what they're doing bother me, that means that I must not be at peace with myself because I'm caring way too much what other people think. Been there. And I needed to hear this today. That's good. I love that. And going back to the big book real quick, our friend Jim, we can see here he's had a pretty strict upbringing. And that seems to be a common theme with some of the stories I'm already seeing in the pioneers of AA. Not all of them, but there's been a few now where really, really strict puritanical upbringing has made an impact on the early lives of these people who will become alcoholics. And right now, we don't see that his life has become unmanageable, but we certainly know where it's going. So with all that, my friends, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me in this Lifeboat of Recovery. As always, I don't speak on behalf of AA or any other sect or denomination whatsoever. I am not a professional narrator. I am just a man, just a grateful recovering alcoholic. And truly, it is a thrill to be here with you. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.